So thank you, Ellie, for your talk. Ellie's talk was very interesting because it was about your disgust about certain foods, you know. So my mother-in-law lived with us for a few years in her early stages of her dementia. And I cooked her chicken because that's what she ate, you know. But personally, I became vegetarian not planning to. I was sitting a retreat in Berkeley, and from there I was going to drive to Madison, Wisconsin for a sort of summer-long seminar. And I was driving behind, a lot of people here have heard this story, but not everyone. I was driving behind a pig truck, and there were no pigs in it, but you know, the pig poop was off the sides and off the back and so on and so forth. And the highway was one lane for about 200 miles. And so I'm driving behind this pig truck for a couple of hours, and I didn't have any conscious thought, you know, and I got out, and what you eat on the road is, for dinner, the best thing is breakfast, right? So I go into a truck stop, and I order ham and eggs, and I take a piece of ham, and I couldn't eat it. I just couldn't. That was it. That was the end. Okay. So, you know, it's like everybody perceives and functions differently and in different circumstances. Like when I'd visit my grandmother, and she had this horrible lamb stew that she would make. And sometimes I thought I became a vegetarian so I wouldn't have to eat her lamb stew anymore. But if I visited her, she would say, I made you this special lamb stew. So I'd have to eat it. You know? It doesn't matter if I was the purest vegan, I'm not vegan, but if I was the purest vegan in the world, I'd still have to eat that lamb stew. So it's like, we don't have to make anything. We don't have to make identity. We don't have to make, I'm vegetarian. You know, I'm pescatarian. Well, I'm vegan. Well, I'm a fruitarian, right? They only eat things that drop from trees, right? Just, you know your function in any moment. And you just have to believe in that. And then it changes over time. And you don't have to talk yourself into anything or talk yourself out of anything. It's just very simple. When we tried to raise my son vegetarian, our son vegetarian, and I went on a sort of cross-country trip while my husband had to teach, you know, in the summer when he was 5, and we were camped up in the Sierras, in this campground, and the family next to ours also had a 5-year-old boy. And I said, you can tell your son to come over here for dinner. And I said, sure. And what do? They gave him a hot dog. What was I going to say? I'm sorry, you know. So, you know, and from then on, he was in love with hot dogs. But yeah, so we have to hold all of this lightly. And it's really, what is our function? In any given moment, what is our function? And not hold on to things so tightly. You know, I'm Jewish, and I have a lot of very Orthodox relatives, and I have relatives who will not go into a non-kosher restaurant because, God forbid, someone should see them there and think that they were breaking the dietary laws. That's, you know, if you're my friend, you want to walk into a steakhouse, I'll go in there with you. You know, I won't even mind if you're eating steak, you know. So it's that kind of tightness that people have about things, and just relax it. Just relax it, and moment to moment to moment, what is the situation? What is the correct thing to do? That's all. So, thank you. Are there any questions? Liz!
I have a question. Okay, so I've heard of people who practice gratitude, and I think there's even been some things on the you know, question and answer from the quantum school about the importance of gratitude, and I don't really understand it, because for me, you know, if I'm grateful, I'm grateful that I'm not in a war zone. Well, that kind of puts me above somebody else, because there are people who are living in a war zone. And if you are living in a war zone, who's going to say, oh, I'm so thankful I'm living in a war zone? So I pick and choose what I'm thankful for. I've never heard anybody say, I'm thankful I had diarrhea. So it seems like it's a picking and choosing of things. This I like, so I'm grateful for it. But this I don't like, and I don't have to say I'm grateful. But if I'm grateful, aren't I just grateful for everything? And so I don't know. I don't understand gratitude, and it may not be important. But what are your thoughts on gratitude, and can it be breaking the precepts to be grateful?
How would that break the precepts?
Well, I'm putting myself above somebody else.
No.
I have this and you don't.
That's,
So
that's not putting yourself above somebody. But I basically agree with you. I don't understand, the people listing gratitude, the things I'm grateful for. I have someone I know who on Facebook every day, she says what she's grateful for. And I don't get it. I mean, this whole universe is already yours. So why do you want to pick out the peony on your front lawn, So I kind of agree with you, and have tended to be fairly dismissive about, practices that emphasize gratitude until a friend of mine who had melanoma, and he went into remission, and then it came back, and it came back very badly, and a few years later he died from it. And I remember about a year before he died, he gave a talk, a Yom Kippur talk at the Jewish Center, and he talked about his gratitude practice and how important it was for him as someone in that situation, that what it did, it was sort of the opposite of what you were saying. Instead of making him feel better than other people, what it did was it helped him put his ego to one side and just connect with what was there, and not get caught in a story of, I have this severe melanoma and I'm going through this horrible treatment and it probably won't work and I'm going to feel really awful and then I'm going to die. So instead of getting stuck in that story, it allowed him to move out of that story. So who am I to go up to him and say, hey, Neil, you're doing it wrong? I mean, it was a wonderful talk. I actually, they published it in the newsletter, and I actually cut it out, and I actually have it in a file somewhere. So these things function, everything functions differently for different people. So yeah, I feel like the notion of, well, I'm really grateful that I have this cool watch, it doesn't move me. I mean, not even, I'm grateful for my family, or I'm grateful for the Sangha, not even that. It's just, like you say, that's how gratitude hits me. But there are other people for whom it opens something. And so, why not? Okay? Many, many, many roads to the mountaintop, many different mountains, but still. Okay? So thank you. Are there any other questions? Yeah.
The stick behind you, that's the first time I've seen that.
Oh, the hitting stick?
Sorry about that.
Do you want to hand it to me, and I'll talk about
I
it?
forgot to mention the hitting stick. I told you I'd forget something. That was.
So now we're fessing up to our, yes, this is the hitting stick, and it's a slap stick. Makes a loud noise. You can see it vibrates. You see how very cool. It goes when you hit somebody. And what this is for is, besides to scare people, this is traditionally it's to wake people up. So when you're sitting, especially a really long retreat, and people start nodding out like that, and the person carrying it around taps them on the shoulder, and they kind of wake up, and then hits them, and it's a slap. It's like if you slap your face. I mean, I don't know if everybody's had been hit on this retreat yet, but if you slap your face, it's like a quick sting, and then it goes away. So that's what it does, it kind of wakes you up. The other thing, what we use it for, we don't do it unless somebody asks for it, and you might say, why does somebody want to get hit by a stick? But the reason, somebody here, you can put it back now, thank you. The reason someone might want to be hit by a stick is because your back really hurts. You can barely stand it, and you get to bend down. And then it kind of, we hit on these big muscles, and so it relaxes those muscles. It's like, sometimes if you go to a physical therapist, they'll give you a quick electric shock. It's like that, it just relaxes those muscles, and then you get to sit up again. And so that's how we use it. We use it for people where the pain is just so great, the pain in their back, that they just can't take it anymore, and then you get to ask to be hit. And when you sit a multi-day retreat, you notice that by the end, everybody is asking, every time the person comes in, please hit me, please. And what it is, it's a sort of massage. It's a quick massage. So it's not, it's not punitive. I remember the first retreat I ever sat, nobody told me about it either. And at the end, and this is traditional, the teacher, or if the teacher's not in there, the head Dharma teacher goes and hits everybody whether they want it or not. And I stopped doing this because I can't hit the people on Zoom, and it seemed sort of weird to have like 2 classes of people, so I stopped doing it. But I remember sitting there, and the person stops in front of me, and I said, I didn't do anything! Like that. Everybody just sat there, nobody said anything. So it's not punishment. It's not that somebody's mad at you. It's either to help you wake up, or it's, a quick massage is what it is. And it makes this loud sound. If it makes a dull sound, that means it's hit bone, and that's a real problem. But if it makes that, really loud sound, that means it's hit your muscle, it's done the kind of, it's a slapstick, so it's gonna make a loud sound, and everything's fine. So, yeah, thank you for your question.
And the form is, when I walk around, you just put your hands like this.
Yeah, you
and then
just
we'll
put your hands
stop,
like this,
and
yeah.
You just bend over and cross your arms.
Right, yeah. In Japan, they hit you here, in Japanese style, they hit you here and here. So it's a slightly different form, because if you bend over, they can't do that, but yeah, you bow and then you come up again. Yeah, and Shoda Harada, who I would sit with a lot, I really like him, he's a Zen master. His home base is Japan, but he spends a lot of time in Whidbey Island near Seattle, and then he also spends a lot of time in Germany. And when I'd sit with him, he would hit everybody at the end of the day. And he's a kind of short guy, and he would whack, like he'd sort of jump up in the air as he was whacked. So he'd whack really hard, and then he'd have like little grooves, That's okay, that's okay. Yeah, in the old days, there's a guy who, he had a hole in the Dharma room floor, and it was like a cantilevered over a mountain, and if he thought you weren't serious, he'd grab you, by your collar and hold you over this hole. That would wake you up. So anyway, at least that's how the stories go. So thank you for your question. Are there any other questions? Yes.
I have a question, and I can see it on the screen too, so I'm not excluding Zoom people. But I can't remember what that calligraphy is.
Oh, that's the introduction. That's homage to the beings who heard the Avatamsaka Sutra. I don't know the exact translation, but like there are 3 classes of beings, and it's homage to each one. That's what it is. So the it's weird. It's the calligraphy you can see. Okay. Yes.
The top character is now moving.
Yeah. Well, homage to, right? Yeah. And the Avatamsaka Sutra is this wonderfully complex sutra. Morning bell chant. The line, if you wish, or the lines, if you wish to know all Buddhas of past, present, and future, you should know that the universe is created by mind alone. That comes to the Avatamsaka Sutra. That's not what that says. But that comes to the Avatamsaka Sutra, and it's the foundational sutra of Huayan Buddhism, and one of the foundational sutras of Chan, Zen, Son, Tian, what we do. Yeah, thank you. It's 1,200 pages long, very small type on very large pages. It's quite something. Yes.
So is your, Zen Master Sung San, I think, was famous for, perceiving demons, all over the place. And I just wonder, as your practice has progressed, are you more or less inclined to perceive demons?
There's one right over there. No, okay, I'll tell you Zen Master Sung San's story. So, first of all, he comes from Korea. Korea is a shamanic culture. Lots of shamans up in the mountains, even today. And so he's coming from a culture where, you talk about demons and spirits and things like that. It's just in the air. So every Buddhist temple in Korea will have a special pavilion dedicated to the mountain god, who's a shamanic being. You won't see that in China, you won't see that in Japan, you won't see that in Vietnam, you won't see that anywhere else. But in Korea, they always have something to the mountain god. So it's just in the culture. So that's the culture he grew up in, even though he was Presbyterian. But the fact is, he grew up in a culture that's imbued with shamanism. So he would see that. And so one time, like 42 years ago, maybe? My son was like 1. So about 42 years ago, he was visiting us. He would come once a year to lead a retreat, which was amazing that he did that. But he came to lead a retreat. And after the retreat, he was staying with us. And after the retreat, there was this little room, sort of the guest room was this little tiny room. It used to be the maid's room because we had a very, very old house. And this little room downstairs off the dining room, and that's where he stayed. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, we hear these, ho! Thunk! Boom! Crash! Boom! All these noises, And, okay. So we didn't say anything, we just tried to sleep through it, and then in the morning we come down, totally bleary-eyed because we'd been up all night listening to this stuff, and he's sitting in the kitchen just totally cheerful, absolutely cheerful. He says, last night I killed many demons. Just so pleased with himself. And we said, yeah, we noticed. And he had this story about, these demons, so the house, it was on a hill, but the hill rose up behind the house. And so the idea was that these demons had sort of gotten stuck because it rose up. And they'd been there for a very, very long time, and they really wanted to get out of there, but they couldn't get out of there. And there was a pine tree that blocked their way. And he had this whole, feng shui kind of story about how these demons were trapped, and maybe someone had been murdered. He said, has anyone ever been killed in this house? Not to, as far as we know. And so he's going on and on about this, and very, very, very pleased with himself, incredibly pleased with himself. And finally, I said, Sunsanim, which is what we call them then. Sunsanim, those demons are in your mind. I was like snotty as hell. Sunsanim, those demons are in your mind. And he looked at me and says, yeah, but you must understand this mind. So that's my Zen Master Sung San and the demon story. Yeah, so these demons, we make these up. If you have, and I find it a very good metaphor. Like if somebody is having serious mental health problems, and I find the notion of thinking of it as demons rather than as, because then it's like not belonging to you, It's a kinder thing. It's like, oh, now you have demons, And we have to figure out how to get rid of those demons, and it's not part of your identity. I find that very useful. And yeah, I should tell my own demon story. So one time I was sitting a solo retreat in Massachusetts. It was a cabin, actually one of the teachers in our school, Link Rhodes, had built that cabin. And it was on a kind of a funny property where they had all these cabins, and mostly people used it for sort of like roughing it kind of for a weekend or something. So it wasn't like all these people meditating. I was probably the only one doing that there. But I had this cabin, and I was sitting in this cabin, and suddenly I felt that a demon had invaded me, just that there was this demon inside me. I can't explain it any other way. I mean, there was nothing, no visions or sounds or anything, but just suddenly I was being inhabited by a demon. And this demon was looking out through my eyes. Yeah, it was pretty scary. And you know, the rule on a retreat, especially a solo retreat, is stick to the schedule. So demon or not, I stuck to the schedule. And then during a walk, and I said to myself, if this demon is still here in the morning, I'm driving to a mental hospital. But so I'm doing walking meditation. And you know, when you do walking meditation, everything changes. You know, you're moving and you see the tree this way and then this way and then this way and then this way. And so everything is changing. And suddenly I had this realization, nobody looks out through my eyes, the world comes in through my eyes. And the demon vanished, just like that. So that's my demon story, and I'm sticking to it. So, yeah, it's an interesting metaphor. It's useful. And, yeah, all things are created by the mind alone. There you go. Charlie, did you have a question?
No question.
Okay, all right. You look like you did.
Agreeing with what you said.
Okay. Does anybody else have a question? Because if there are no more questions, we go back to sitting. You ready? Okay. All right. Thank you.